certain amendments to Article 15 of the Constitution of North Dakota.
And the prime sponsor is not here. I've texted him and asked him to hustle up to us. But I will ask if there is any testimony in favor, and we'll come back when he arrives. Any testimony in favor? I will start testimony opposed.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Scott Tillman, and I'm the Chief Operations Officer for U.S. Term Limits. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify today in opposition to SCR 4008, an attempt to circumvent voter-approved term limits that have not and will not affect anyone for years. Passing a resolution for term limits in Congress is the driving reason behind U.S. term limits' activities in North Dakota. We want a convention call. And the reason why we supported North Dakota state term limits is because of the failure of the 2021 Term Limits Article 5 resolution, and it showed disconnect between the North Dakota legislatures and their constituents. If we don't pass, we'll continue our efforts in North Dakota, and once we pass, our efforts will begin in other states to pass congressional term limits resolutions. This resolution is unconstitutional by the very language SCR 4008 proposes to change. The legislature is prohibited from sending these types of changes back to voters. Section 4 of the 2022 Term Limits Amendment acknowledges the conflict of interest legislators have in meddling with voter-approved term limits and made it a constitutional requirement that any change to legislative term limits need to come through the citizen initiative. I asked Eric Winters, an attorney specializing in elections and constitutional law, to testify today about this. The people of North Dakota overwhelmingly support term limits, and U.S. term limits will continue our efforts in North Dakota until an Article 5 term limits resolution is passed, as the people of North Dakota want. In 2022, North Dakota voters overwhelmingly approved state legislative term limits. This is not a partisan issue. It's a matter of representing the will of the people. In closing, I urge the committee to honor the choice of voters from only 2 years ago and oppose SCR 4008. Thank you for your time and consideration. Respectfully.
So, Mr. Tillman, felt like a lot of threatening language there. Like, if you do this, we're going to sue. We're going to come after you. That didn't feel like a very, very friendly testimony. I'll just start with that. But I would ask if you have an opinion on the I don't know if the word allegations is the right word, that when the term limits measure was gathering signatures, there are pictures that prove that it said congressional term limits on the table, that that's what they were gathering signatures for, that this got on the ballot under false pretenses. Do you have any comment on that?
People signed a petition for state legislative term limits.
With advertising stating congressional term limits.
There was a group out there gathering signatures, and they were gathering signatures on multiple issues. One of those other issues that they were gathering signatures for was, do you support congressional term limits? They sent those signatures to us, and we uploaded them to our term limits supporter database.
Can I ask the reason why you chose to use North Dakota to further your national efforts? Why North Dakota? Because ours is the easiest to amend?
No, we want to pass an Article 5 term limits resolution on Congress.
But why
We need
North Dakota?
We need 34 states. North Dakota is one of the 50 states. That's why we choose North Dakota as a state that we need to pass.
That happens to have a very easy constitution to amend. Any further questions for Mr. Tillman? Senator Castaneda.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
No,
I've got a confusion because we're talking about, are you talking about congressional term limits in Congress via a U.S. Constitution Article 5 convention? Or are you talking about term limits on the state assembly?
Well, I had originally intended to come today to testify on the one that's being heard after this, 4011. And then I saw that this was being heard. So I'm testifying on both. So I'm sorry.
Sir, but
I
so
mentioned
that's why
the
I'm
other one in it.
confused because that's why I'm confused. I don't think we can testify on both. We got to come at the same time.
No, well, technically you should only talk about the one that we're talking about.
And that's why I mean on
Apologies.
both. Of course, you can testify on all of them. It's just so I was wondering if you can then What are your points on 4008 specifically? Because I honestly got confused between
Sorry
4008 and
about that.
2011. Would you be able to clarify that for me? I guess that's my question.
This was
I appreciate
passed
it.
just,
Thank you.
yeah, sorry about that. This was passed just 2 years ago by voters at the ballot box. It has not taken any effect in North Dakota and will not for several years to come. Nobody's been term limited out. And to go back and after voters put this on the ballot and then voted specifically to stop, to keep the legislature from amending it, is kind of a slap in the face for voters. We want to be friendly with the North Dakota legislature. We just want an Article 5 resolution. It's not our intent to be antagonistic or anything. We need to get an Article 5 resolution to term limit Congress. It's overwhelmingly supported by North Dakota voters.
But are you talking about Article 5 of the state constitution? Article
Sorry, I
5?
was referring back to the Madam Chairwoman's
The US
mention on the how it sounded aggressive. Sorry.
I would argue that actually the term limits are affecting us right now. And let me give you an example. My colleague, my running mate, died the day before yesterday.
Sorry to hear that.
We have 21 days to fill his seat, and we can't get anybody to run, or we're worried that we can't get anybody to run because they're going to waste a 4-year term of the total 16 years that they could possibly have. They have to give up an entire 4-year term to be able to fill the last month of his session. Because of the way that it was drafted, you can't run if you can't complete it within that time, right? So we're having a hard time filling vacancies because people are like, I don't want to give up a 4-year term to be there for 2 months.
I'll be amazed if people don't sign up to fill that vacancy.
Do you know how hard it is to get people to run in North Dakota? I'm not kidding you. It's excruciatingly hard to find people who can leave their job for 4 months, serve in the interim, take, honestly, the level of pay that we get paid is a pay cut for a good portion of people. It is difficult in North Dakota. So I just would argue that it is affecting us today because of that. Senator Bromberger.
Madam Chair, and I just want to clarify that I am affected by this because I only get 6 years. I am term limited out as of right now. I am in my last term and I've only served 1 session. So I only get 3 sessions in the Senate. So this is something that affects me now. So I disagree with your statement that it hasn't gone into effect because I am in my last term and I have only served 1 half term.
But you can remain and serve another full term.
No, he cannot. Because he was affected by redistricting, he had a 2-year term.
No, you're at the start of the term that you can remain. That's what voters approved.
They
Anyway.
didn't know that's what they did.
Further questions, Senator Lee.
If I approve term limits in North Dakota, where it means that if you are only there for 8 years, that is 4 legislative sessions of 80 days each, that's 320 maximum days of serving in the legislature. That is not enough time to be able to really figure out everything that's going on. It is really difficult. And we have good people who have some institutional wisdom, and Senator Braunberger at this point is one of those, who will everybody in this building will be gone in 6 years, everybody. But if I support term limits and you are voting in your district in North Dakota, I'm telling you that even though you like your candidate that you think is doing a good job for you, their current legislator, I think that person has served too long and you can't vote for him. And I don't know why I should be able to control your vote in your district for someone that you think is doing a good job. Because that's what term limits are. Somebody arbitrarily decided because somebody else is serving and they're there and they don't like their positions on things, or they think that they're too decrepit or whatever it happens to be. The wishes of other people will prevail over the people who are actually the constituents of that individual, and they are unable to vote for them. And that is wrong. That's not the way the American system is supposed to work.
Voters recognize that incumbency has huge advantage, and voters decide on term limits. It's not me here voting in North Dakota. The voters decided that they wanted to put term limits on North Dakota because they watch what happens when people are in there for a long time. And we talk about institutional knowledge and expertise. And the example that voters see is they see people who have been there for a long time giving away money like mad and doing favors for their friends. So that's the institutional knowledge and expertise
Thank you
that
for,
people see.
thank you for calling me crooked. That's awesome.
Yes, I thought
Senator
the-
Lee,
No,
I
that's
thought
what,
the same- I
that's
thought
where
the same
voters are
thing.
coming from.
No, because in North Dakota, you are looking at Congress, and I don't even feel that terrible about everybody in Congress. But this is a citizen legislature, which serves 80 days every other year and is on interim committees in between, goes home to real jobs, lives with our own neighbors, communicates with all of these other people. I do not believe that well-informed people don't want to have a choice. They can choose. The ballot box is the term limits. If I don't want to vote for the people in my district that are running, I'll vote for somebody else. And that term limited that individual out that I didn't care for. I don't know why you should come in from any place else and tell us that we cannot do it the way our own citizens in our own districts with a part-time legislature, although for some of it, it is darn near full-time. And say, because I think your person's been in there too long, you can't vote for them because I don't like the fact that that person is there longer.
I'm
And you're
not
going
the
to
one
have a
who
real
come-
hard time changing my mind about that.
I'm not the one who came in and did it. The voters of North Dakota approved this overwhelmingly on the ballot.
And
you
they were
funded it.
misinformed.
And you funded it. Senator Barta.
Thank you, Chairman Rhodes. Mr. Thomas, I just want to back up to the comment about too soon, and to that point of voters being misinformed or not fully informed. You could say it's upon them to gain that knowledge. I would argue that it was very much of a loss leader, if you will, to bring people to the table, because as I was campaigning and having a conversation and someone asked about it, and I explained that this was for our state legislature and not congressional terms, they said, oh, then I voted wrong, and immediately expressed remorse, felt that they made an error based on the information provided to them. So I guess my question is, what is that time frame for people to correct the errors that they felt? I think, the voters have expressed to us, I think every one of us heard of this, people tell us that we voted wrong, we got it wrong, and they want to correct it. So why should they be limited through this approach to rectify what they felt was a mistake?
The Secretary of State and Attorney General put together the ballot title, and it said nothing about Congress. And the voters that went in and voted on this issue did not vote on Congress. They voted on the state legislature.
You can claim that, but that is not what people told me, because
We
the
can look
literature
at
in
the
front of them.
documentation.
So, well,
Okay.
we'll move on.
Any further questions? Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Further testimony on 4008, specifically 4008. Yeah. Yep. Will do. Yep. I got everybody's number, Jeff. Testimony in favor. Oh, sir, he's not in favor, so you can come up. Or no, are you in favor or opposed? Okay, I'm telling the gentleman behind you that you were sitting back down because you're opposed, not in favor, so. Yes, so this is, oh no, you're right, I'm sorry, we are unopposed. We are, I'm so used to doing in favor first, but Senator Dwyer didn't come, so we jumped to opposed. You're right, we're unopposed. And then I got distracted by Senator Magrum, so.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Eric Winters. I'm an attorney specializing in election law and uses of the initiative process. Although my practice is in Oregon, a state with a very active initiative system, I have clients also who seek my advice about related questions in other initiative states. One of those clients is U.S. Term Limits Foundation. They asked me some questions about this concurrent resolution. And when I answered those questions, they asked me to share that with you. The first question was, can North Dakota's Legislative Assembly propose amendments that would have the effect of altering or repealing the term limits that were just passed? The simple answer is no. And I can read straight from the constitutional amendment. It's not unclear. Section 4 of Article 15, notwithstanding the legislative assemblies authority to propose amendments to this Constitution under Article 4, Section 16 thereof. The Legislative Assembly shall not have the authority to propose an amendment to the Constitution, this Constitution, to alter or repeal the term limitations established in Section 1 of this article. And that is the term limits that were just passed. Further, it says the authority to propose an amendment to this Constitution to alter or repeal the term limitations established in Section 1 of this article is reserved to the initiative petition of the people under Article 3 of this Constitution. North Dakota's Constitution has two routes to be amended. And I'm sure you're abundantly aware of those two routes. Article 3 gives the people.
We just spent a whole other bill talking about them, right?
Right, exactly. Article 3 gives the people the right to use the initiative process. If you look at the two routes, both really can be turned into two phases, the proposal phase and then the submission phase. In order for an initiative to be proposed, you have to gather signatures, you have to have sponsors, there's a specific number of signatures, only people who are electors may participate, and there's a time frame for doing it. And if it goes through the legislative route, there's also a process too. You can't just have the entire legislature together pass it as a majority. You have to have one house, a majority of it, and then you have to have the other house pass it as a majority as well. Those are parts of the same phase of proposing. And the measure that's being proposed here clearly violates Section 4. And Section 4 speaks to proposing. And that's an authority that is given to the legislature. It's not an authority that is given to a sponsor of a bill, for example, or even a committee. So ultimately, at some point, if this resolution is to continue, there's going to have to be some sort of recognition that there is no authority.
So Mr. Winters, as a lawyer, have you ever had clients who purposely do things to get things into the courts?
Oh, sure.
You don't recognize this might be one of those?
Well, I would love to hear the theory.
I'm just curious.
And ultimately, I think it's pretty clear that the people proposed this for a reason. It's not too hard to read between the lines. There is one process that requires a sampling of the public will to understand if there is a wide interest in proposing something. The other route does not have as wide an interest. It is simply asking legislators who, in this case, are self-interested because it is their jobs. It is the career path they have chosen, and
Okay. Funny.
to the degree that that's what it is for some people, that's the way it is viewed. And the decision of the people of your great state to decide this is going to be the limit, and we want to make this decision to be something that is brought to us by the people themselves, not by the legislators, is an authority that they have, and it's an authority they exercised. So if you're going to thwart that, I would like to hear why you think you can.
Any questions for Mr. Winters? Thank you.
Thanks.
Further testimony opposed?
Madam Chair, committee members, my name is Lanny Kenner, District 7. I'm requesting no votes on SCR 4008, and the reasons are, number one, the citizens of North Dakota have spoken when they voted in the term limits in 2022, which passed with almost a supermajority of over 63% of the votes. Number two, the only way to change the term limits now is by initiated measure. Number three, the citizens have spoken, and by trying to change it this way, is like a slap in the face to the citizens. Number four, this 69th legislative session is the worst I've seen. Townships, counties, and North Dakota citizens have lost more rights this session than any session I've seen. It looks like some have been in the legislature far too long and have forgotten who they work for. The citizens of North Dakota are your bosses, not your slaves. I think it's really sad that term limits had to be put in place, which I was kind of torn between the voting process but you know, incumbents get so embedded, it's hard, they're really tough to defeat. SCR 4008 should be rejected with unanimous no votes. Thank you. Any
Any
questions?
questions for Mr. Kenner? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further testimony opposed?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Dustin Geverlow, Managing Director of North Dakota Watchdog Network. I am not here to defend or argue term limits at all. In fact, I did not sign on to the measure specifically because I thought it should be 16 years, whichever way you choose. On the issue of the partial terms, I do have a creative suggestion, amend Article 4 to allow for a partial 2-year term. Section 4 of Article 15 is language that I wrote. Some of you may have noticed that because that was the language that I proposed a couple times. We started collecting signatures in 2019 to lock the
Can you tell
legislative.
me where, sorry, let me,
Section 4 of Article 15,
okay.
which is term limits. That was what the attorney prior was referring to. As some of you may know, I've proposed and started the process once, and COVID and a broken leg got in the way of finishing it. The idea that Article 3 is genuinely powers reserved to the people, and that the discussion previously on a previous bill related to whether the legislature should have the ability to amend Article 3, it needs to be defined in an amendment to the Constitution to prevent the legislature from using the powers that the Constitution gives it already. Section 4 is the same language applied to this that I've suggested for Article 3 in its entirety. And as you can see, the way that this is written, it says that any changes to Section 1 of Article 15 have to come from the people. So the discussion of court challenges, I would support court challenge because I would like to see whether a provision that restricts the legislature from amending certain pieces of the Constitution would fly. Because I would like to know that before I attempt to do that on Article 3.
Well,
So-
and I would argue, what if we were to propose an amendment that said this section may not be amended by the powers of the people? I mean,
It gets into what does reserved mean.
right?
If the powers were truly reserved, then there would be reserved. I mean, we get into the sanctity and of the Constitution.
And
a
I
lot.
think, it's recency versus supremacy. I mean, there's so many
Yeah.
questions that I think people
Yeah.
honestly have. And that clause right there is what brings a lot of those questions to bear. And I think that's one of the things where there are some people who are proponents of amending this section. Now, I don't like the wording that is specific in this bill right now. I want to actually stick to the conceptual framework that was passed by the people, but I think there's some wording changes that could happen. Like you and I talked as we were walking here, maybe it's 4 complete terms and it doesn't matter whether you're in the House or Senate, but you still are capped at those, you can only win on the ballot 4 times.
Yeah.
So that when you have that redistricting year or you have a vacancy, that those aren't those weird one-offs. And so, but you still have the same problem where if we propose it, we're going to find out in the courts, I'm sure, based on the amount of money that U.S. Term Limits is spending on the radio right now. I am quite certain that they plan to take it to court regardless of whether it actually preserves the kind of framework that they propose, just changing the wording a little bit. Like, I don't like this expands it too much to me in my mind, but I think my original intent, I had actually drafted a proposal and hoped that Senator Hogue would introduce it. But once this was on the table, we thought, let's use it as a vehicle instead of introducing a ton more resolutions. So
And Madam Chair, your suggestion of being able to lock out the citizens, I would say the only way to do that would be to delete Article 3
yeah,
entirely.
I don't want to do that, but it feels like what was done in this measure feels equivalent. Any further questions for Mr. Gavrilo? Is Senator Dwyer coming? Did you get a response? Okay. That's what she's doing. She's with the clerk right now. Yeah. I just don't want to close the hearing and then have him show up. And I had told, any further testimony opposed? I'm just trying to like work out timing and, okay. Okay, I also sent Senator Magrum away, so, does it sound like he's going to come? Committee, okay.